I'm a marketer, so I'm always looking at like how do all these different methods, like what's the best customer acquisition systems for them? And I'm curious, how does this work? Because I imagine somebody who's interested in buying into a franchise, that's one of the problems I'm assuming they would like to be somewhat solved. That's part of I'm guessing that's part of like what you're looking for when you join a franchise, that it will have customers. And I'm curious, like, how do you address this?
What franchising allows is for you to grow and scale with that customer as well and put pins on a map, that's a common phrase in franchising, in these other markets, that now you're able to better serve that customer and set a franchisee up with existing business when they come in. Is it generally enough to pay all their bills and everything? Most often not the case, but to give them a little head start or a little jump on it is very helpful.
Tom, welcome to Growth Stories podcast. So happy to have you on the show. So you help business owners franchise. Can you tell us a little bit about your firm and what you guys do?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Well, as we were talking pre-show, I've found in the clients and folks that we end up serving, they usually hit a crossroads in their business career where they've built a business, it's successful, it's working, and now they say, what's next? What do I do with this thing? Do I build it? Do I scale it? Do I add more locations? Do I sell it? What do I do? And that's when they enter our world, because we help them franchise their business if that's the direction they choose to take. And really, I consider myself a distribution expert. Franchising is my primary piece where I spend most of my world working within, but really helping a founder, generally a founder-led organization, figure out what's the best pathway forward. And if it's franchising, how might that work with accomplishing the goals they're looking to achieve?
And for those people that aren't experts in franchising, like myself, I'd like to maybe I can start it off like how I think of it, and you can show like how does it actually work? So in my mind, franchising is a way to solve like capital constraints for scaling versus trying to buy everything yourself, buy a new location if you are brick and mortar. And maybe other alternatives would be like a licensing model. When someone's looking at franchising, what problem are they trying to solve, and what are the alternatives they might choose instead of franchising?
Yeah, great question. So I've definitely found you hit the nail on the head. There tend to be three big factors or three big problems that franchising solves. The first one is money, which you just described. You can self-fund as in open up more territories or locations of whatever it is. You could even find investors into the business, but franchising really becomes a series of mini investors coming into your franchise system. So instead of finding one investor that's going to surge a lot of cash in to make it grow, and that's certainly very common in the tech space, in franchising, we're looking for many small investors that are coming in. We're looking for that one person that can afford to open one. So we're looking for 100 of those versus one person that can afford to open 100 locations, kind of an idea.
Right. I'm tracking it in my mind as you're describing this. And it sounds to me like it's all a little bit lower risk because you have a larger pool of people. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated to deal with all those people, but at least it's not one massive pillar of risk that everything is hinging on.
That's exactly right. One of my favorite things I've been talking a lot about the last, call it year or so in my space of franchising has been how franchising really helps reduce risk for the founder and eliminate liabilities for the ownership group of the company. So to your point, the investor, the franchisee that comes in, they fund the franchise to get it up and operating and going. And that means they're responsible for funding it. That means they're also responsible for the day-to-day operations. So that the big second problem it solves is the people problem of how do we find staff to run this? Who are we going to train? What happens if someone doesn't show up? Every small business owner that's grown is at some point run into the fact of, my people aren't showing up, or they leave the company unexpectedly.
It's all on the same day too. They quit and don't show up, and
that's right. And they forgot to tell you about it. Right?
Yes.
So those are all things where franchising now helps transfer that management responsibility to the franchisee. That even if it's a semi-absentee owner, they're still it's their investment that they're responsible for. And then the third big issue that franchising helps solve is just the ability to grow more quickly. So it just allows you to, now the stories we hear of franchising where you read in the news where some brand sells 100 franchises a year, those are the exception, not the norm. But franchising does allow you to go from what I call adding locations to multiplying. And it gives you that ability to multiply and scale much more quickly. So I love alliteration. So I summarize it as it solves the problem of money, management, and then to multiply.
Love that. Okay, this is making a lot of sense. And what does it only apply to brick and mortar, or are there other business types where it makes sense, where there's still remote businesses, but you want a franchise?
Yeah, great question. That comes up a lot. Most people think
I'm gonna ask you all the basics.
No, but it's such a common theme because most people, when you think of franchising, think about a McDonald's or a Subway or a Jimmy John's or a Holiday Inn. Right, exactly. That's exactly right. One of these food or hospitality lodging type of franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of us, we're most familiar with those because we're regular customers of those. If not every day, most of us every week, we're stepping into a franchise for lunch or dinner or quick something. And so that's top of mind. But that's actually a small percentage of franchising. In today's world, most franchises are actually service businesses. So think of it, post-COVID, home services have actually been the number one category in
that
franchising.
Completely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could have like an HVAC franchise or what have you, a tree trimming business franchise.
You got it. That's exactly right. And what's been growing in popularity the last few years has been professional services, which you might not think of, but bookkeeping companies.
Oh, I've seen this. Yeah, I've seen this for like CFOs, for example. There's like franchises where they have to sell independently, but they have all this kind of back office support from the main franchise somehow.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Whether it's a bookkeeping or a fractional CFO franchise or a coaching franchise type model where someone can buy in. Think of Action Coach as one of the largest in the world that's a professional services franchise.
I think I've seen their ads. Yeah. Yes. Okay. This is making a lot of sense. And so if I have services, well, one more question, just because I'm thinking of a lot of my audience is, maybe they're in the tech space or they're in the consulting space where they are like high-end boutique consulting managing directors, for example. And kind of the way a lot of these consulting firms work, it's a little bit like, what's the right word? Like a community, each person has to, they're responsible to bring in some business. They also kind of have to fulfill on the business, and the benefits of being together are definitely there. There's some benefit of them all grouping together, but it doesn't change like the profitability. And I've always wondered, like, is there a different way to run a consulting business? Does franchise apply to that kind of professional services?
It definitely does. It definitely does. It depends on the owner. Certainly in professional services, whether it's management consulting groups, lawyers, legal practices, CPA groups, et cetera, and a variety of others, certainly a partnership model has been utilized for decades and for a very long time in those spaces, kind of almost more like a traditional apprenticeship program. You come in, it's more of an apprenticeship, and then there's a partnership offered for locking in and keeping the brain trust, right? These knowledge experts in. What it provides to do, in my opinion, where franchising can help, it can be either a complementary strategy. That's one thing that oftentimes people don't think of in a business model like a professional services. It doesn't have to be the main thing. It can just be a complementary strategy. Maybe you have a long time, really great consultant or team member or rainmaker at the group that decides, I want to go and start my own thing. Well, instead of going to start their own thing, they could start a franchise where they could either become just an independent franchisee as an independent agent, or starting their own office. Maybe they want to they relocate near the in-laws or something and want to open up a location there. So that's one potential
Mhm.
option that comes up. And to your point, what you were mentioning before, where sometimes it's a centralized hub that corporate provides, oftentimes fulfillment that's done at corporate or some back end services. And
Yeah.
then you franchise more of a sales rep type territory that the person would then be able to own.
That makes a lot of sense. And so when we're looking at, I mean, the primary thing, I'm a marketer, so I'm always looking at like how do all these different methods, like what's the best customer acquisition systems for them? And I'm curious, how does this work? Because I imagine somebody who's interested in buying into a franchise, that's one of the problems I'm assuming they would like to be somewhat solved. That's part of I would say, I'm guessing that's part of like what you're looking for when you join a franchise, that it will have customers. And I'm curious, like, how do you address this?
Yes. So a lot of times people think buying a franchise is essentially a free ticket to the lottery or an
Yeah.
ATM machine that you just push a button and
Yes.
cash comes out. And that's not necessarily the case. While the franchisor, part of their duty is to train you on how to run the business and to provide systems and marketing strategies that have worked in other markets.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean it's necessarily a guarantee. So, as a franchisee, you're still an owner of your business. You're still responsible for going out there and trying it. And just as an anecdotal example, I've been a multi unit franchisee. And when I bought into that franchise, I followed everything that they recommended. And it was a home services business. And when I did that, one of the recommendations that most franchisees had found success with was commission only sales reps. Well, I did
Mhm.
that for about 6 months, and the commission only folks that
And they weren't good?
they weren't good. Go figure.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of
I've heard of
retired folks.
this.
Yes,
Yes.
I got a bunch of old retired guys that
Yeah.
were just looking to talk to somebody, but they weren't motivated, and or I got unfortunately alcoholics and drug addicts and folks that just were not up to professional snub. And so I said,
Mhm.
I've got to do something different. So I had to pivot in my own franchise system. And so I changed and started I offered a full-time salary and benefits and other things. And lo and behold, in a few weeks, I found a professional that came in and all of a sudden was doing exactly what I'd hoped would start happening. And
Yeah.
it started the ball moving in the right direction at that juncture.
That's a great example, and I guess it's just real life. Everyone's hoping, a lot of people are still hoping that there is something guaranteed or certainty in business, but you have to solve all the problems if it's your business. So, I love that story.
Yeah, and sometimes the franchisor, when done well, and especially for the folks that may listen into this, sometimes you have what we call a national account, where you
Mhm.
have a customer that you're really only able to service in your region or your local area because that's where you happen to have coverage. But what franchising allows is for you to grow and scale with that customer as well and put pins on a map. That's common phrase in franchising in these other markets, that now you're able to better serve that customer and set a franchisee up with existing business when they come in. Is it generally enough to pay all their bills and everything? Most often not the case, but to give them a little a head start or a little jump on it is very helpful.
Yeah, makes sense. And so for the Big Sky franchise team, I'd love to hear, because you didn't just start, you've been doing this for quite some time, building this up. And I'd love to hear, how did you, like, when you first started, how were you finding customers and clients versus what are you doing now? Like, what kind of systems have you built now to bring more people into the franchise world?
Yeah, great question. Well, I've been doing this literally my whole career in this kind of, like a lot of folks probably who listen in. I went to college as a business management major. I wanted to get into management consulting, and the just happened to be my first real opportunity that seemed appealing was in this world of helping companies turn into a franchise. And I fell in love with it. And, for lack of a better description, I've been that, the technician, right? This is a craft
Mhm.
that I love and I'm good at, and eventually start my own business. And so in doing that, when I first launched, some of it was just taking my best shot at internet marketing, right? Pay-per-click ads and so on.
Mhm.
And in our space, when I first launched, trade shows seemed to be pretty effective, which was kind of interesting. Tides have changed. It's not quite as what it was when I first
Mhm.
launched, but the one steadfast has just been a consistent referral network that's been established, like a lot of great professional services providers. And I attribute part of that is just a reputation you build for yourself, right? Making sure
Yeah.
that you're fulfilling, the referrals stop if you aren't doing what you say you're going to do, and you're treating your customers well, and so on.
This is the age-old marketing advice of do a really good job for a decade. It's
That-
like very effective.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
do a great job, try to treat your customers well, fulfill the promises you commit to, and all of a sudden 10 years later you get these referrals that keep coming through.
I love it. So you built up this referral network, you tried PPC, and now this is kind of, you've hit that point where it sounds like it's self-sustaining.
It is, yeah. And certainly, we're still making sure we're able to be found online, but if that, it ebbs and flows and highs and lows, and all the things are constantly changing with that for me,
Yes.
I know a little bit about, but so that I can understand it, but I don't know all the inner workings of modifying and doing all of the behind the scenes stuff. So anyway, it's something that for me has been very helpful in just making sure we're doing great work, so that the goal is I look at every customer as a talking billboard for us, a walking testimonial.
Yeah, I love that. I love that attitude. And going back to franchising, I'm still curious. What are the alternative methods that are out there instead of franchising? One would be obviously licensing. Like, why would you, and I'm sure for a lot of your clients, you recommend they don't franchise, right? So what are the cases for the other ways to, other similar ways to grow, like licensing or other methods?
Yeah. So common alternatives to franchising are licensing, as you described. That's the one that comes up most often. Business opportunities, dealerships, distributorships. There are a lot of variations of how this flows. The most common ones are licensing and then business opportunities. And the fundamental difference between franchising, licensing, and business opportunities, it comes down to three key ingredients. The first ingredient is the use of a common brand. So do you want someone to use the same brand name, logo, and so on? The second ingredient is a system of operation. Do you want everyone to follow the same program? How important is that to you, that there's a certain quality standard that's being run, or a certain marketing system, to your point in franchise that we were talking about before, is do you want everyone following a similar system on that? And then the third ingredient is the payment of a fee. So name or brand, a system, and the payment of a fee upfront or ongoing. When all three are in place, in most instances, that's a franchise. Licensing is when they're using your brand and they're paying you a fee, but they're generally not following your system or a strict standard that's required. So, and then a business opportunity is when someone uses your business system and they pay you a fee, but they do not use your business name. So you'll see business opportunities very often in, for example, vending businesses, vending machine, these dollar store type businesses where you can basically buy a business in a box, and they're really just looking to sell you the stuff to sell at your store or in your vending machine. In many cases, that's where the residual comes in for them. They just hope that you get it up and going, that it's successful, and then you buy product from them.
Love it. Yes, that was a very clear, distinct description. And I realize that in the marketing world, I think we have slightly maybe less precise terms for, like, biz op has a certain connotation versus what you described as a way to scale. And so thank you very much for that breakdown. It all makes a lot more sense to me. Well, this has been a really great conversation. Where should people go to find you?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. If someone's interested in learning more or talking about their business, we offer a free consultation, no obligation, and we have a wealth of free resources on our website, free quizzes and things at bigskyfranchiseteam.com. It's bigskyfranchiseteam.com.
Love it. Thanks.